Muy buenas noches a todas y a todos. Sean bienvenidos en esta primera actividad del tercer Encuentro Internacional Alquimia Vocal. Bueno, mi nombre es Armen Almond, soy la directora y creadora de Alquimia y es un honor para mí poder pues darles la bienvenida a esta noche. Antes de presentar la conferencia de hoy, me gustaría agradecer enormemente a todas las personas que están ayudando de una u otra manera a Alquimia. En principio, por supuesto, a la Fonoteca Nacional, en la cual pues estamos. Gracias a Tito Rivas, director de Fonoteca, y en especial gracias a Mirna Castro, quien gracias a ella y a todo su equipo el día de hoy, que también está presente, Oriana, Julio, Rubén, Emilio, por ahí, también logramos tener todas nuestras actividades de sesiones para los alumnos en Artes Vivas, que está aquí al ladito. Por otro lado, también, bueno, cabe mencionar a Venas Rotas Discos, a Man in Motion y a la Facultad de Música de la UNAM, en donde estaremos cerrando este ciclo el sábado, con todo el día lleno de actividades abiertas, así que pueden también acompañarnos. Bueno, va a haber taller, etcétera. No quiero echar tanta palabrería. Y por supuesto quiero agradecer a todos los profesores que este año están formando parte del equipo, a Esparta Martínez, a Fernando Vigueras, a Xochitl López, a Fides Krucker, Richard Armstrong y bueno, su servidora que también está dando el laboratorio anual. Y por supuesto a cómplices, siempre hay cómplices en el día a día, y bueno, a Beatriz Luna y a Paola Landa. Y por supuesto a alguien que anda por ahí tomando fotos todos los días y nos saca en el mejor y el peor ángulo de nosotros, que es Mónica García, quien es la fotógrafa oficial de Alquimia Vocal. Voilà. Entonces, continuando. Ahora sí presento la conferencia del día de hoy. Como bien dije, es la primera y pues es un gusto poder escuchar fuera también del aula las experiencias y las vivencias de Richard Armstrong y de Fides Krucker, quienes hoy nos van a contar un poquito acerca de esta relación de 40 años en lo profesional y también una amistad y esta complicidad. No quiero contar mucho de ellos, pero la grabación lo requiere y ya saben, la vida. Entonces, solo mencionaré que Richard Armstrong, nacido es británico, vive ahora en Nueva York y él es miembro fundador del Royal Heart Theatre, que está en Malherbe, Francia. Y me parece que trabajó muchísimo, muchísimo tiempo en Banff, Canadá, en donde conoce a Fides. Fides, canadiense, es una gran cantante y actriz, quien también tiene un programa de enseñanza con duración de 2 años y trabaja como performer y como profesora en solitario y en vínculo con Richard. Así que, pues nada, damos la bienvenida y comenzamos esta mesa. Muchísimas gracias.
We're using microphones not because we don't have loud voices, but for the recording, yeah. Just before going into the beginning of our talk with you, we mostly are going to be speaking in English, and I know that there are some people here who are very good at translating, so if you don't speak any English, make sure you're next to someone who does and can translate, and so you can do it as we go along. Some things you'll see a little translation on the screen, but is that okay? Is everybody good with has everybody got someone nearby that can help if you don't understand? Yeah? Okay. Well, the first thing I want to say is how thrilled I am to be back in Mexico City after more than 35 years. I came here a few times in the 1980s when I was a little bit younger than I am now, and had the good fortune to meet Aline Menace, who is here in the audience tonight, and Susanna Frank, the directors of the Teatro Laboratorio La Rueca, who were really responsible for me coming all those times. And I'm so thrilled that we're back in contact. We saw each other a little over the years, but here we are, a little older and just as much friends as we always were. And then there's my dear friend Fides Krucker, not Kruger, but Krucker. And we promised to try and tell a few secrets tonight, so I tried to think of just a couple of things that she might not know, and I got one, which is about potty training. I don't know if you can translate that. I looked up the Spanish word for a potty, and I found, well, I don't know, I found, what? Well, put it this way. When I was a little boy, a very small little English boy, my mother was teaching me to use the basinica, exactly. And I don't know, this is a very strong memory I have. I can remember sitting on the basinica and going, oh, oh, oh. And I only did that because my mother said, make a sound, make a sound. And I remember these words. And that's what I've been doing literally ever since. Through a very long career making sounds and helping people make sounds. Well, Sarman mentioned the Roy Hart Theatre. I met Roy Hart. I was very fortunate at quite a young age 21, to meet my teacher, Roy Hart, real name Ruben Hartstein, from South Africa, who was studying theatre in London at the Royal Academy. And I think I knew, I was a fine arts student. I was a painter, still am. And I'd always done theatre. I sang all the way through my childhood in choir and did productions at school. By the time I was 21, I think I knew that I wanted to find a place that would give me, to help me with the connection between life and art. Very simple, but a big thought for a 21-year-old, really. And I was, as I said, I was lucky enough to meet Roy Hart, and the 8 years I spent with him, I think I learned pretty well everything I needed to know. And then following on from that, I started to travel. Once Roy Hart passed away, I started to travel all over Europe, performing, teaching, and then eventually to Latin America, Central America, North America, and you know, the career is full. I think the simplest thing I can say is the career is one thing, but the career is made up of individuals and people and connections with powerful people that you love more than the career itself. And Fides is one of those people. She's Roy Hart had a big connection with Jung. Alfred Wolfson, his teacher, was a contemporary of Jung, and some of you may know about Jung's work and the relationship he managed to describe, which was to do with the anima, the opposite, the other. And I have a lovely husband in New York who I wish was here, but I also have had very profound and deep connections with particularly women. And one of them was Vivian Young, who, alas, is no longer with us. And about 10 years after Vivian passed away, I met Fides. And I feel, and I've never said, this is a secret if you like, I never said this to Fides. I feel as though what I lost with Vivian, I found in Fides. That's all I'm going to say for now. 2 secrets so far.
Well, Richard has already made me cry. And we've hardly started. I'm very touched to be in Mexico. I'm very touched to be in this hall. This hall is named after Murray Schafer. And Murray Schafer is a great Canadian composer. He died a few years ago. And his whole ecology of sound has had an enormous influence on people throughout the Americas, South America, Central America, North America. And we all share something, if any of us have met Murray, of how to listen and how to absorb nature as part of our way of listening. So I didn't know before arriving that we were going to be in this hall of such significance to me. Murray is someone, I've performed 3 of his operas and counted him as an artist who fostered my career and helped me to find my voice. I started singing quite young. Well, I say it's young, it was 21, similar to Richard, because I'm feeling very old right now. So at 21, I accidentally tumbled into opera and very quickly had roles on stage. I think it happened because I had a fairly loud voice as a child. And when I was about 8 years old, I belonged to a club of young girls. This is a secret you may or may not know. A club of young girls that was organized, sometimes it's called the Guides or the Brownies. And we would start every session singing the national anthem. And I loved to do that. And I would sing the national anthem. And the woman who controlled the event said, "Who is singing so loudly?" And all the little girls around me pointed at me. And I was so embarrassed. I ran out of the room and I never went to another meeting of the Brownies. So when I was much younger, my feeling around having a voice that could project or an excitement around singing was connected with shame. And I would say that that was one of the great things that my relationship with Richard began to unknot or unravel for me. So I went to Banff in 1984, and I studied for 2 years. And Richard arrived at a certain point. When I first got to Banff, I used my voice as a little bit of disguise. But after meeting Richard, I realized that I could get dirty, that I could be playful, that I could let out secrets that didn't have to have words, but that could come from sound. And the person who I think summed up our relationship best for me is my mother. So we both start with our mothers. And I was trying to say, well, Richard, he's this was just a few years ago, such a close friend, and we've done so many shows together, and he is a colleague, and she said, he's your mentor. And it was simple, one word for all the feelings that I have towards this individual who's the person I want to talk to when I feel troubled. Whether it's going to be words or whether it's going to be sound, because he's heard all of those sounds come from my body. I think that's all I really need to say by way of introduction. And I guess I could continue by saying, for the 25 years that we sang together, we premiered and developed seven different productions. Some of them operas, some of them music theater pieces, some of them interdisciplinary. Do you want to?
Well, I mean, they're so varied, actually. They're one notable opera that we did, which was, you could also speak to this, was a long rehearsal process where I played 5 roles and Fides played the leading role. I played a 12-foot high polar bear, a small round brown bear,
Part of an owl.
the bottom half of an owl. Fides was the top half. I played an elderly Inuit man with some difficulty, with the voice of a wolf. And what was the 5th one? I can't remember. Maybe it was only 4 roles. I exaggerated. So, and it was an opera created by British composer John Metcalfe. The first half, which Fides can speak to, was set in the Arctic and was all in Inuktitut. And the second half of the opera was set in England. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
The opera's name is Tongrak, and that means spirit. And the owl that the two of us created was the spirit of my character. And I traveled twice to the Arctic while we were developing the show, and I learned how to throat sing while I was up there. And then that was something that I brought back. We spoke with the composer about it. We worked on the throat singing together. And it was something that our characters could do with one another. So myself as the Inuk woman and Richard as the polar bear, when he's dying, the two of us have a throat singing pattern, which is all about breath and spirit. And then in the second act, when we end up in the United Kingdom, and I am in a circus because I'm basically captured, and it's not an unusual story for Indigenous people in North America or in Canada that they would have been brought back to the colonizing power. And I'm in a circus being displayed, and he is the brown bear, and we are able to communicate with one another, again through these throat singing patterns that I was entrusted with by an elder in the Arctic, and that would have been around 1987, 88, I think.
I think all the productions that we did together, which you'll see and hear a little of tonight, for me, it was always that Fides and I were able to do things on stage that we would never do in our private lives, I don't think. Some of the things, anyway.
Yeah.
And that was quite wonderful to be able to have that degree of trust with someone and live certain things, live passionate relationships, distraught relationships, quite seedy and dangerous relationships. I mean, to live all that on stage was such a gift, really.
And often we took on the role of directing one another.
True.
So there was an opera in Vancouver called Star Catalogues. I was one of the performers. You were the director. And that would have been 1994, 1996. Another show called Muscle of the Soul. You created it.
That was a solo.
Yeah, a solo, and I was the outside eye or the director for that. I couldn't actually make it to the show because I went into labor and had a baby. So baby number 2. Baby number 1, he is the godfather of.
We played a homeless couple in the future.
Yeah.
With an imaginary child. That was powerful.
Yeah. We did that in Toronto. We took it to Montreal. That was in the late 90s, 96, 99. Yeah, I didn't wash my hair or my body for a whole month because I felt it would be more truthful to my character. And you put up with that.
Well, I had things distracting me on stage, one of which was the only time I've had to appear completely naked at the end of the piece. but not completely naked because I was also covered with blood, which was some kind of horrible mixture of, it was not a very well-equipped theatre, and it was a bath. Before I came on stage, there was a bath full of tomato ketchup or something like that, and I had to put myself in the bath and then come on. And I think it looked good.
It was terrifying when he came on like that. It was very effective.
But one night, the only shower in the dressing room was not working after the show. I had to go home covered in it. So that was fun.
Yeah. We had another intense moment when 9/11 happened in the US. We were supposed to be going to Banff to work on a film together. And the film was going to have many different aspects. A longer film in which we were talking about your teaching, and a shorter inserted film that was more like a video in which we were a couple, where you were more like an impresario and I was your, what would be the right word for it?
Wife?
The performer acting out what he needed to have acted out.
Right.
And it was called From an Opera About Divorce. And in fact, the filmmaker was exploring her own divorce. I was exploring my divorce. And you were really the mediator in that experience, I would say.
But, you know, we're going to see some
excerpts
of these.
Yep.
So why don't we go to your...
We'll first go to, so
extract.
I am not a technically gifted person. I want to say that to begin with. But I have a screen in front of me and I will need to share it with you. So I'm going to read first from a chapter that's out of my book called Reclaiming Calliope, Freeing the Female Voice Through Undomesticated Singing. And the Spanish is in front of you. Christine Graves did the translations for us. I'm saying her name correctly. A longtime friend of Richard's. And I will read it in English. Seeking Creative Voice. In 1987, I had the good fortune of meeting Richard Armstrong. Richard is tall and handsome, leonine. An enigmatic mystique surrounds him and his vocal methods. He asks things of his students that are radically different from the usual classical approach, and singers emerge from his classes feeling emotionally connected and vocally freed. Flutters from nerves, as well as a small crush, coursed through me as I headed up the Laszlo Funtek backstairs for my first private lesson. In a windowless classroom, I reticently revealed to Richard the gravelly strain that had begun to show in my singing voice after a particularly strenuous year of creation, rehearsal, and touring in the United States. My D flat, and E crackled, preventing clean singing in the lower passaggio, the range of notes that embrace the female speaking voice. Nor could I rely on my G, G sharp, or A. Those pitches so close in timbre to a woman's cry sometimes failed to sound. Eyes rooted to the drab linoleum floor, I explained that I was still reverberating from my recent divorce, which had been finalized while working in Berkeley, California, far from friends and family. I was desperate to fix my vocal troubles by covering things up, but Richard wanted me to dig in, deepen my connection with the mess, splash around in what was fragmenting. My back hardened against his proposition. It seemed anything but right, terrifying, in fact. The sound that had first drawn me to opera singing was akin to the perfect, unattainable beauty of a Vogue cover. When I was 21, this seemed like a good thing to aspire to. Its gloss was exotic and blameless, suiting the conflicting mix of escape and certitude that I had looked for in my first marriage. I was 26 when Richard asked me to shine a light on the cracks in my voice. and the resulting sounds gave me a glimpse of just how wide each person's timbral range can be. Richard's suggestions risked exposure and the unknown. The roars, peeps, and shrieks that emerged from my body, which he insisted were simply human sound, spoke to my imaginal feminist self through legitimizing all sorts of raw feeling. The vibratory chaos breaking my surface felt revolutionary, and even though I had no language to contextualize these vocalizations, their cathartic nature began to liberate me from my need to sound perfect. If opera had seduced me into making sound, Richard's Roy Hart lineage encouraged me to do it with less disguise. This is a sample or an extract from Oral Treason, which is really about witches being burned at the stake. So that was from Oral Treason. And Oral Treason were texts from the Middle Ages when witches were being burned at the stake. There were two actors, Richard being one of them. There was myself representing the feminine or woman in the piece. And the translations had been done by Norbert Rubsat. And in a way, we could say that, well, first of all, being able to make that kind of sound on stage was thoroughly thrilling to me. And without your guidance into that space, there's no way that I would have felt, first of all, that I could have made those sounds, but secondly, that I could sustain them, that my body could be a part of it, that I could breathe in a way that over and over and again, I could invest in that really dark space that that particular bit of text required me to go into. And it was exciting to vibrate the way my body vibrated while making those sounds. The director of the project, Keith Turnbull, is one of those directors who watches his actors very carefully and with saying very little pulls the best out of each of them. And in a way, the most exciting piece for me within all of that, when I think of the team, was the composer. And the composer is he's no longer alive, a gentleman, Argentinian, who was living in Germany, Maurizio Kagel, who did a lot of very experimental theater work. And there was a band, as you could see, of maybe 12 players, and then the three of us performers in the middle of that. I realize that I have to
And you're going to
pull that back up to play
do
you.
a second extract.
Yeah,
right?
give me time.
Yeah.
I have to find it. Is there anything else you want to say about it while I do this?
Well, we watched this the other night, and a lot of it I don't remember, but it was exciting to see some of it again.
Well, that was also interesting to me to, in a way, go down memory lane, to go back to 1990 and remember who I was at that time, who you were at that time. So this excerpt is a piece of text that Richard does, where we get to hear you work with language in a way that has so much texture and color to it. I'll push play.
Yeah, please.
Consecration's the name. Fiddler at weddings. I come from the valley. Nightfall's a surprise. I reach the forest, become aware of an unusual presence. I turn around. Two eyes glowing like coals pierce the darkness. I walk faster, crumble my gift of cake, drop the pieces one by one for the animal that's closing in. The cake gets smaller and smaller. I'm scared, think I'm doomed. Go through my pockets, hands shaking, looking for something else. I touch my instrument, it sounds. Suddenly the wolf stops. Dawn arrives in the nick of time. I'm safe.
Fides read from her book just now, and just so strongly recommend you all to read it because it's really wonderful, wonderful book. And I've been writing all my life really, but I've been writing in the last years. It started as a book which may yet see the light of day as a box, and I was going to call it The Voice Box and have the manuscript inside a kind of box with other objects. And at the moment, its current iteration is called Mangoot, Stories in the Air. Mangoot, as many of you will know, is a fruit, a beautiful fruit, delicious, fragrant fruit. It was also the name given to a deadly typhoon which cut across the Philippines and Hong Kong in 2018. And as you can understand, giving that title to the book is a kind of metaphor. So the book is at one and the same time a kind of memoir, but it's also a travelogue, and it's also an attempt to teach secretly in some way. That was my intention. So I chose an extract to read to you tonight, which is, I chose it partly because there is a Mexican in it. Those of you that are in the classes might recognize something that gets described as we go along. So it's, as you can see, it's called nadando, swimming. This time I've been given an artist studio in the woods. These were studios in Banff, at the Banff Centre. It is round with a pointed roof, and being in it evokes, to my surprise, feelings of a forgotten childhood longing for the perfect secret house in the woods. In this sense, the studio has all that one could wish for. It's fully furnished, has a little kitchen, a bathroom, and at the back a second door opens onto a deck, circular like the house, the entire thing built out of pine wood. There are some reminders of previous residents, pinholes in the walls, half-burnt candles, even a visitor's book. One entry reads, "Passerby enjoyed Mexican hospitality." Presumably there was a Mexican, or at least Mexican food. I turn the page. Yes, from Mexico City. A certain Jose, writer, artist, curator, it says. I feel the presence in absence of these persons, like the three bears with Goldilocks. On this, my third day of playing house out here in the forest, there are even passing deer to further summon up the distant corporeal memory of that secret house, of how important it was. My secret house took various forms. Sometimes it would be thatched, rose-strewn, at the end of a path in the heart of a forest, always with a chimney spiraling smoke. Or it would be under the roots of a tree, just a door, maybe a lighted window built into the bark, or a toadstool house reached only by a ladder. I must have seen them in books, and I certainly remember drawing them incessantly. I'm curious about the passerby. At the entrance to the colony, there's a notice stating that access is strictly by appointment, and in any case, since the path only leads to the studios, no one theoretically passes by. It occurs to me that, in keeping with the fairy tale-like nature of the place, the same passerby might visit me. I would offer hospitality, just like Jose. I take the path to my secret studio. I'm thinking about what I want to write about: water and gravity. Water. Early this morning I was swimming in it, in the pool, imagining as I did so that if the lengths were laid out in one direction, they would make 1 kilometer, and that I was swimming that distance across a bay in Greece or in Corsica. As I settled into the swim, the line between reality and imagination blurred. I remembered the classes of Denis Brousse in the pool at Maléhague years ago. How this robust and bull-chested Frenchman from Lyon would introduce the class participants to the idea that more often than not, we aggress the water when we swim in it, beating it aside with our arms and feet, hitting it, pushing it away from us. That this aggression towards water was born out of our fear of our essential liquidity. We are, after all, up to 60% water ourselves. The water is found in the extracellular fluids of the body, but above all in the cells themselves. With Denis, we would sing underwater, sink to the bottom of the pool, listening to each other's songs, learning to let go of the fear, to be once more literally in our own element. Identified with the water and as relaxed within its embrace as in the womb itself. From our earliest age, we are taught to fear water as an alien and dangerous substance, one that, unless we learn to dominate it, to make it make it submit to our will invade our bodies and end our lives by that most terrible of all deaths, death by drowning. Not only are we taught to fear water, the fear is inherited, since the cell itself, the very water of our bodies, remembers. Not only actual events, it remembers also by myth. Death and drowning, suffering and survival, the great flood sent to punish the transgressor. My swim brought this back. We inherit the fear that leads us to aggress the very substance of our own being, and this fear can be heard in our voices. For some participants, just dealing with the idea of putting themselves horizontal can be a major step. In Caracas, the International Theatre Institute had arranged for some 12 opera singers to do a workshop with me. A radical move designed to break down barriers between the thriving experimental scene in the city and the more traditional arts world. The singers arrived, all women. Perhaps they'd been advised to wear loose clothing, suitable for movement, perhaps not. In any case, they enthusiastically took up positions around the piano, all immaculately turned out, looking expectantly and not a little curiously at me with my sweatpants and bare feet. I looked back at them. They would not have been out of place at an English society wedding or at church on Sunday, all beautifully and expensively outfitted in little suits and dresses, impeccably made up, highly perfumed with lots of gold jewelry, and all without exception wearing mean sets of high-heeled shoes in severe anticipation. Court shoes, my mother would have called them, presumably because one would wear them to court. And certainly these ladies' careful sartorial and cosmetic preparation indicated that they did indeed view a trip to an English voice teacher as akin to being received by royalty. One snappy little two-piece outfit even had fur trimmings on the sleeves, despite the Caracas heat. Rolling on the floor was clearly out of the question on that first day, but I did make the suggestion that they might like to remove their shoes. This was greeted with total consternation and not a little amazement. I might as well have asked them to disrobe completely, such was their initial shock. Removal of shoes meant removal of support, of structure, of identity, no less. By the end of the day, being an enthusiastic and generous crowd, only truly generous and enthusiastic souls could have dressed like that, in fact, in the first place. Most had taken off their shoes and were moving around with the glee of royalty slumming it on a night off. On the second day, many of them appeared for class more practically dressed in an array of designer leisure suits. At some point in our days together, we even made it to the floor for rolling and breathing exercises, and they ended the workshop thrilled with the growth and flexibility in their voices. Not all students who come to class refuse gravity to that degree, but most of us resist it even when we're lying on the floor. In class, when we observe the various ways we do this, our amusement at seeing ourselves described or our idiosyncrasies illustrated helps to release the tension further. For example, there's the two-sided person, front and back, no sides, who falls flat after the enormous effort of pushing the body over so that the rolling is more like moving a heavy slab of marble. Or the four-sided, four-cornered body, the one whose hands and feet never touch the floor but spiral up, leaving the center body to make all the effort. The one who rolls really fast to get it over with quickly, who you later discover was named Snap-Along as a child. Or the one who rolls so slowly as to always cause a traffic jam. Most of those in a new group will initially roll with their mouths tightly shut. Air is like water. You could drown if you let too much in, yet they must be breathing, but how? The skin of the body, the skin of the floor, skin meeting skin, more of the skin meeting more of the skin more of the time, letting go of the fear of drowning, of gravity, of water. Pour yourself across the floor. The floor is getting softer. No bones, no muscles, liquid. The floor, the water within us is the solvent. Without it, the chemistry of life cannot function. We remember that in our embryonic form, we had gill slits in the region of the pharynx. We remember from where we came. Liquid memory. As muscles relax and articulations release, the skin begins to breathe. The floor skin no longer feels hard, and a kind of natural cushioning or suspension develops. The body is heavy, yet it floats. A reminder of our earliest origins. We expand out and across the floor as we breathe out. We contract and gather together as we take in the air. This is the action of the very soul. That's an interesting mistake. This is the action of the very cell, and maybe the soul itself. We seek a balance between our sensitivity to gravity, which at sea level, because of the 60-mile column of atmosphere between us and outer space, pushes down on every part of our bodies with about 15 pounds of air pressure, and that sense of action which is our living identity. If there were no limits to this melting release, we would leak out or explode. So we recognize the pressure and adapt to it. Our liquid nature finds harmony with the air itself. We are literally swimming in it, participants in a peristaltic, pulsating progression of movement through space, evoking patterns and searchings that began for each of us in our mother's womb. As it did then, the fetus floats and actively assists in its own birth. It stretches and contracts, generating motion, liquids pumping, and emerges to assert authentic action, swimming in sound.
When you're working with Fides or Anne-Marie or your students, what is it that you're trying to do with breath?
Let it pass through the whole body, through each articulation. You know, whether it be shoulder, through the hips, into the knees, right through to the feet, so that the oxygen flows right through every part of our beings. It's like the wave coming up the beach.
I know often the time it takes to allow yourself to really have a breath that does fill your whole body. It's almost as if as a singer I would have been too embarrassed to take that time or to nourish myself with that. And so the breaths would get, shorter and shorter. And I can remember many times you saying, only pay attention to your breath now. And it's as if paying attention to that inspiration allows the exhale or the sound that's going to come out to have an organic sense or a source, as opposed to them being separate entities.
Now, just as an experiment for you days, listen one more time to the one you're doing. Now try and start from where you finished. Inspire, take in-breath. That the in-breath is a preparation and a mirror of what's going to come out. Very often often it's not given more attention than just a kind of refueling. It's the pre-story, it's the anti-story, it's what provides the idea. So it's a thought. In this case, you could say breath is a thought. That's better. Now, as you take your in-breath, just to let your ribcage.
So that was from an opera about divorce, and an example of some of the work done in the studio and little snippets from the various films that we made that were more like a video within that. And the woman asking the questions is named Julie Trimmingham, and she's a multi-talented artist. She was a filmmaker at that time and is now a writer, a very, very beautiful writer and storyteller. Yeah.
And as Fides said earlier, that whole film was made just after 9/11. It was very powerful to be there working in that way, just literally a week later.
Well, our travel was difficult because no planes were flying. You had to take a train from New York to Montreal and then fly across the country. It took us extra days. Like we should have arrived maybe more like the Monday or Tuesday.
And
we didn't get there till the Saturday.
And everyone was, all of us, including the people making the film, the subtext was what was going on in New York. And I think we were all in a state of shock, really.
Yeah. And it was interesting because we were in the act of breathing and rehearsal. And on so many shows on television, there were experts teaching people how to breathe because everybody was holding their breath.
Right,
I mean, that to me was very interesting, that we were mirroring something that was happening in the world at large. I'm going to read another bit from my book, and it will be familiar, the subject, to those of you who were in class the other day. And if it causes you to want to do something very special, you are welcome to do it while I'm reading. So this is chapter 13 of Yawns. Oh, let me do the thing I'm supposed to do technically. There. If a student asks for homework, I suggest that they investigate yawning, sighing, belly laughing, sobbing, orgasm. These 5 intrinsic human activities have so much to reveal about breath, emotion, vocalization, and the body's ability to restore itself. When I first became obsessed with yawns, there was very little research available to the general public. To encourage my students to take the yawning plunge, I had to rely on what I had witnessed in my studio or gleaned from alternative health practitioners, as well as the occasional scientific tidbit. Number 1, tight jaw hinges and gripped voice boxes find relief through regular yawning. 2, once a yawn has completed, increased mouth space encourages greater vocal resonance. 3, yawns bathe the cells of the body in chemicals that are deeply relaxing. 4, most yawns occur as we transition from one activity to another. 5, in primate studies, when the big baboon yawns, all the other baboons get to yawn as well. I see people yawning. This is making me very happy. Even some people who weren't in class the other day. Very good. In 2009, my student Angela Rawlings sent me a 2-page article by Dr. Andrew Newberg. His research illuminated the breadth, complexity, and value of yawning's chemistry, showed that a yawn's cornucopia of natural drugs leads to self-reflection, empathy, and consciousness, as well as improved memory retrieval and neurotransmission. He explains that yawning may promote self-awareness through evoking unique neural activity in the precuneus region of the brain, the part that lights up in mature meditators. He also notes that the contagiousness of yawning is not as mysterious as we think. It syncs us up with one another socially, which speaks to the yawn's valuable role in meeting the human animal's specific survival needs. It is easy to feel how beneficial a yawn's neurochemistry is when a yawning session is not curtailed. First, I become aware of all the places that I am holding, of the tiredness I feel. Full-bodied stretching follows so that aches vanish and vigor renews. As my nose drips and my eyes water, mental space opens up, making transitions easier, transformation imaginable. Together, body and mind dissolve power structures, embrace cooperation. Yawning can be used not only to warm up for rehearsal or to imagine a new character, but as preparation right before stepping on stage. Performing difficult roles in the theater requires well-honed, in-the-moment survival tools, as well as emotional transparency. By freshly combining relaxation and alertness, yawns lead to a more flexible, interpretive instrument. Thank you. One of the greatest experiences in my life, which is maybe similar to you sitting on your potty as a child, was giving birth to my daughters. And when I was giving birth to the first daughter, it was in vogue to film the birth process. But I had no real interest in that. However, I wanted to record it. And so I have an audio tape, it's actually on DAT, an old form of tape, with my sounds of giving birth. And many of the sounds were exactly the kinds of sounds that I would have worked on with you in a lesson, until one moment when I was pushing near the end, and I sounded exactly like an orange juice expressor. I'd never heard that sound out of my body. It was so striking. I was saying, oh my gosh, I've never heard this. It was so active. It was so, in a way, aggressive in the body and needed to accomplish a task. So that's a vocal secret, was the orange juice sound that came out of my body. It took several months before I wanted to listen to the recording. And when I listened to it, I got past the beginning section and then the orange juice section, and then my daughter arrived. And I heard her very first sounds on the planet on this tape. And they were adorable. They were like, She sounded like a pussycat for about 2 full days. I think it was a little traumatic for her. And there was a part through the process where I was using words and I'll have to hold the microphone away, saying things like, "Oh, Jesus." Excuse me if you're religious, but these were the sounds that I was making. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I'm really going to scare my daughter. So I started going, "Sweet baby." As if that would help her to come a little more easily into the world. Anyhow, there was a group of women that I worked with, and many of us, and then the whole group as a group, had a chance to work with Richard Armstrong. And the name of our group was Urge. And there were 6 of us, and we did a lot of voice work every day. We trained every morning. We did movement, we did voice. And that act of giving birth in real life became a scene in one of our pieces called The Birthing Diva. And I would arrive on stage in a full gown as if I was going to sing with an orchestra. And the lights would hit me and I was ready to go. And then the women were behind me, the other 5, and they would unzip my ball gown from behind and peel it off my body. And I was wearing just underwear underneath, and I would crawl the stage and make the sounds that were part of giving birth and also part of the woman as animal doing a task that she knows very well to do in her body. So sound was very crucial for me through that experience. The recording that I'm going to play you now is actually not, it's after the years that we performed together. And what matters to me in this recording, it's an improvisational recording, is the relationship. And it's a relationship with a guitarist from Philadelphia named Tim Motzer. And he is a prolific improviser and recording artist, and has mostly recorded with instrumentalists. It's not that common for voice to be part of the improv world in the US and Canada. But we had a real click one time. We performed as a blind date in Canada. We went, oh, this is something. So he invited me to his studio and I recorded with him. I would say that when I was making this recording, my desire was for simplicity and an act of listening. And I had recently had a small injury, not to my vocal cords, they were fine, but to a muscle right here. It had snapped. I was teaching a very large group and I was twisted. It was an upright piano. It was a bunch of individuals who were in wheelchairs and on scooters, and the circle was very wide, and I was turned very far. My neck was turned, and I sang a loud sound, and I heard this little snap. So the muscles that support the voice box were a little strange. So when I was doing this recording, my desire was to truly listen to my voice, never to push it, and to allow myself to respond to the situation. So here is an excerpt from one of the pieces, and it's probably 9 minutes long, which is fairly long. So feel free to close your eyes if you want to let the sound wash over your body and enjoy the repetition and the simplicity of it. that wasn't 9 minutes. But we've just found out that we have a little less time than we thought we did. So I'm going to cut that one short, and we're going to move forward to talk about another project that we did together in 2012. That was in development for a couple of years.
Which you were the producer of.
I was the producer of.
You commissioned the score?
I commissioned the libretto and the score, and it was an electroacoustic opera. So all the, I don't want to call it the accompaniment, the tape part by Louis was on speakers. And we went through in the development process several years of trying to figure out how to find the right man. And the right man was Richard. But we went through several actors in Toronto before finding out that Richard was the person who we wanted to work with.
Well, I think I was the vocal coach at the beginning.
Oh, yeah, you
right?
were the vocal coach.
Yeah.
And then we just got rid of all the other men, and we decided that you should play the part.
Right.
So let's show a short, the composer Louis Dufort, the librettist Tom Walmsley, let's just show a little bit of that. And then we'll go into your improv after that. So this is just a little bit of the final version on stage, so you can see some of the acting and singing, and then we'll go to the tail end. Oops, I didn't see what I have to do.
As I feel your desperate flesh, I won't think about their evil deeds, their power, their victims. Does your handsome man in blue use his handcuffs on you? Do you play games with his gun?
Am I less than you expected?
I'm from an Easter egg. It's hollow end to end. It's only made of chocolate that covers up the hole. And the Easter egg alone is blasphemy. It's all that's left of faith, and naturally you are more than I expected, and exactly what I need and needed.
Whenever I play an extract from this opera, I always go back to what we were talking about at the beginning, the idea that we were able to do things on stage, well, not always on stage, but at least within the opera, even if they were off stage, that were somewhat taboo. The opera's about an older couple having sex, and the other aspect that was always interesting, they were having kind of rough sex, right? I mean, there was...
Well, and I was married.
And she was married to a cop, and then the rough sex was not actually on stage; it was off stage between Act 1 and Act 2, I think. Or
Well, and he was a minister.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Suddenly in scene 3, you discover that the guy that she's seeing is an Anglican priest who is about to end his relationship with the church because he's having an affair with a married woman at his old age status. So we do have an extract, which is the scene 3, which is my role of what was he called? Rick? Mick. Okay.
Rick was my husband. Mick was my lover.
Right. This is Mick, the priest, preaching his last sermon to the congregation, and there's some reverb on the voice, which is to indicate the church, and then when the reverb comes off the voice, that's his interior world. Only other thing to tell you that the sounds that I'm making, you'll hear some whistle tones, some very high tones. You'll hear some multiphonics, some chorded sounds, and you'll hear some engine sounds, the sounds of an engine. And none of those sounds have been treated electronically whatsoever. They're just natural human sound.
Okay.
You'll never hear me again. I cannot help anyone. My acts are vile, and all creatures and nations fill me with bile. No love of creation makes me praise the Lord, but I praise the Lord. haven't touched my faith, and not one law for the rich and one for the poor. The rich have no law, but hundreds more are made for the poor and anyone else disturbing the peace or their sleep. But this has not robbed me of God. Don't bow to owners or their enforcers. Don't worship an idol or treat their lives as holy writ. And if I may preach one last time, Christ bowed to no one but God alone. But I haven't, and I won't. It isn't blood and screams of children or newspapers' disgusting glee. It isn't that fabled man in the street, petty and greedy, glued to TV for sports and gossip. I am no better than he or she. I am no genius, but in the pit with everyone else, and faith won't carry the day, I'd say. Anyone here is more full of love and closer to God than me. I hateth my brother. I am a liar. I cannot love God. I believe in the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and life everlasting. But I don't love you, and I can't love God. I live for sin, and in sin of I love no one but a married woman. I love a woman, and she alone, and I can't love God. My mother had the blood of a snake, God rest her. She had the blood of a snake, just like her son, and if she gave it to me and she got it from someone, so I forgive her after too many years. If I'd been the snake in the garden, I'd have uncoiled in Eve and bit Adam to death and lived happily ever after. I love Julie, who I'll follow to hell. But not you, or God, or anything else on the face of the earth. So go in peace, brothers and sisters. Go and keep the faith. to say?
No, I had questions.
Any questions? You don't have to ask questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
My English
sorry.
is...
I think it's off.
Hello.
Oh, yeah.
Good evening, Nats. My English is so bad. I'm sorry I said something bad or a bad word. I have a question. I like the music. I am a singer. My music is varied. How can my neck hurts when I sing? How can relax my body? How can relax my voice after singing?
Sí, entiendo.
How can I relax my voice to singing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say it's really, you know, it's a combination of the work process, slow work, microscopic work, careful work, but also your mind. You know, in this context, that's all we can say really, because it would be a process of getting to know you and finding out who you are and where this problem, if you can call it a problem, where it comes from, and then unraveling the source of it. And but it's possible, without a doubt. Do you want to add anything?
When you're feeling discomfort in your voice, your body is telling you something. And a lot of the things we know how to do, when I talk about the yawning, I mean it very sincerely. Take 10 minutes to yawn before you practice. And that will tell your body an awful lot about how to coordinate and how not to push too hard. And even if you're in the middle of a practice and you think, oh, I'm getting tired out, think of something that you'd like to simply sigh a sigh of relief, and use that as a very gentle, fully emotional, but soft, sweet release for your body. Our bodies are really beautifully designed for sound, but the constrictions we have socially sometimes cause us to push our ideas more than we need to. So, you know, look around and see what the babies are doing and what the 2-year-old and the 6-year-olds are doing, and steal from them.
Buenas noches. Al momento de generar una composición con la técnica de Roy Hart, ¿qué diferencias? Bueno, no, ¿qué diferencias? ¿Qué abstraes de esta perfección y técnica que tuviste en la ópera para llevarlo al Roy Hart? ¿Qué abstraes de ahí? ¿Y cualquier sonido es válido para una composición con la técnica
I would say
Roy Hart?
absolutely, yes. Every sound is music. Every sound. Is that your question?
Sí.
Yeah.
¿Y qué abstrae de la técnica de la ópera para el Roy Hart? ¿O nada?
You mean, are you talking about how bel canto sound relates to so-called Roy Hart sound? Yeah. I mean, this is my answer. Bel canto sound is like classical ballet. It's a vocabulary that originated in a certain sort of way. It's only one part of all the possibilities that you have. And it's beautiful. I mean, there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with it. But it's a specialized vocabulary. Yeah, please.
I would say that for really all my career, I've been trying to bring the bel canto and what I have learned through Richard of the expanded human voice together. And one of the things that the bel canto is very good at is, and it is a very specific aesthetic, is the softening belly and the softening pelvic floor. And I found, in fact, for myself as a female singer, and I think that there are some differences, or at least I experienced some differences, when I got really good teaching from a particular New York teacher named Neil Seamer in about 2000, actually all my expanded sounds became easier. And that was because I was able to be softer through my pelvis. So I think that you're talking two things in a way. You're talking aesthetics, but you're also talking traditions of technique. And in many ways, the singer will resolve that in their own body based on their desire to communicate. And so it's possible to go from a fully high shredded sound to a perfectly clean bel canto sound. It's just a matter of reorganizing everything, as long as you're not pushing too hard to get it, that you're really letting the body speak for itself and for it to emerge truthfully, emotionally from the body.
Thank you for everything. And my question is for both of you, if you already identify within yourself and the others the sound for you, both in particular, that are kind of giving you a sense of liking or a sensation of you identify already probably the texture, this taste of these sounds in you and the others when we speak or when we are practicing something in your workshops. And my question is more for the ones you don't really like, because for us, as we are learning as well, we are demystifying or practicing more how to detach from the things we don't like, right? More often than the things that we like, because the things that we like, of course, we like them. And then that's my question: how for you is the experience now that you are having all these years of career and being practicing with other people, being listening to other people, identifying and studying the details, and how it is for you to when you don't. I know for you it's not like not liking, and that's where my question is. Yeah, that's my.
I think for me it's more a case of discovery with my own voice. So I might have thought at the age of 50 I knew all my sounds, but that's not true. I remember going to Italy to work with a composer there, and I was to play the mother of Alexander the Great and play the part of Olympias, Alexander the Great's mother. And she was quite an evil character, and we were going into improvisation with the composer. And I would say that I haven't always loved the top end of my voice. I've liked the middle, I've liked the lower, but the top, more elusive. I think of myself as a mezzo-soprano. But there was something in playing with how would she seduce her son to become the most powerful man in the world? How would a mother do that? And this high sound that was so seductive. I mean, even remembering it, I'm getting goosebumps on my legs, because it was a sound that scared me. And it scared me because it was so powerful. And it also excited me. I remember walking home after that improvisational session, and I felt like my feet were floating on the ground. I didn't feel like I was even touching the earth anymore because it was something I didn't know. I didn't know I could go into that it was a kind of seductive evil. So I think for me, it's less of what do I like and what do I not like from what am I hearing, but what is it as a part of myself that I've not allowed myself to explore? And then when I explore it, it's no longer dangerous. I know where it is. I don't mean just vocally, I mean from a soul point of view. I know where it is, and it's less likely to hurt me or somebody else because I've investigated it. I hope that gives you an idea. So that when I'm hearing my students, when I'm singing myself, that's how I'm understanding sound, from the point of view of what deep magic is it allowing the human being to have with themselves.
I think we may have gone over our 15 minutes. Are we okay for time, Salomon? Yes, no? Yeah, okay. Wait, maybe one more question and then we'll... Yeah, well, maybe two more short ones.
Hi, I just have one question. In my experience and in the years with the singing and with the voice, I discover that is the best for me that no hear my own voice. Just let the voice free, and my mind know the note that I need to do the next step. But if I, ¿cómo decir? Agarro mi voz. If I take hold my voice, yes, I pierdo algo. Algo en el proceso por querer controlar mi voz.
Yeah, well, we were talking about this in class today. You know, at the end, towards the end of class, we were talking about a favorite subject of mine, which is conscious spontaneity. Yeah, so what you describe as the controlling mechanism, it's okay if it's allied to your free self, because from what you've said, I mean, I'm sure you really are hearing yourself. What you're saying is you just don't want to control what you're hearing.
Yes, I don't want to control this because my voice es más grande cuando dejo de controlarla.
But the two sides of the coin, the spontaneous self and the conscious self, need to have a friendship, need to have a relationship.
Okay.
And you'll find it. I'm sure you'll find it.
Thank you.
You're on your way.
Yes.
Yeah. Last question.
Gracias. Bueno, en clase comentaba que para mí la voz sigue siendo un gran reto porque implica compartir algo íntimo que viene desde dentro. Entonces, creo que no soy la única a la que le pasa que compartir algo íntimo que nos hace sentir casi desnudos, muy expuestos, nos hace a veces como sentir bloqueos, nos hace sentir que se cierra la garganta, que nuestro cuerpo está comprimido a pesar de intentar liberarlo y calentarlo. Entonces, aparte de las técnicas previas para antes de subir al escenario, mi pregunta es ¿qué es lo que pudiese desbloquear o eliminar el miedo en el cuerpo o de la mente? ¿Qué es lo que pudiese hacernos confiar más en nuestra voz y conectar más con nosotros?
Could I get a quick translation of the question? Just a short version.
sharing, and what would be the advice, to control the fear when going on stage? Very short.
Yeah, such a big question. It's really a big question, and not something that's really easy to just answer in a soundbite. In a short answer. All you can do is look at the intrigue, look at the manifestation, and then try and work back to the source of the manifestation and see what's there. And that can take a long time. But it is possible, I've been watching you and listening to you in class. I sort of feel, wow, you're like I was saying to this other young lady, you're on your way. You're doing what you need to do. You're doing it.
And sometimes the biology of fear is quite similar to the biology of anticipation or excitement. And if I can change my way of looking at that moment and saying, oh, what would be exciting about revealing myself, then it's less fearful. So it's a new conversation between the body and mind around what am I actually feeling, and then how can I convert it if I really do want to be on stage.
I think we should stop there, but I just want to say a big thank you to Sarmen. Yeah, it was really wonderful to be given this opportunity to share a few secrets. Thank you.